This is a hobby author publishing presentation, where my hobby is your entertainment. Welcome back to Shadows of Secrets. The hunt has led to a place of legend and fear, the Aviary District, rumored roost of the Ravenshadow assassins. Every clue points to a devastating possibility that Gerrod's mother, Elysia, was not a victim, but a monster. Now they must descend into the heart of the Ravenshadows' lair, a place sealed by time and traps. Today, in Chapter 11, The Face Behind the Masks, the final secrets of Elysia's past will be unearthed. But is Gerrod prepared to confront the truth of who his mother truly became?
Chapter 11. The Face Behind the Masks. They reached the edge of the Aviary District as the moon climbed towards its zenith, casting stark, skeletal shadows. There was no formal gate, only a crumbling section of an ancient retaining wall, choked with thorny vines that seemed unnaturally black even in the moonlight. Stepping through the gap felt like crossing an invisible threshold into another world. The low hum of the distant city faded abruptly, replaced by an oppressive, unnatural quiet. Before them stretched a desolate landscape of decay. Great, domed structures of stone and rusted iron, the aviaries themselves, stood like weathered skulls against the night sky, their intricate lattice walls mostly collapsed or broken, creating jagged silhouettes. Tall, stone perches, designed for birds of prey, tilted at precarious angles or lay shattered amongst weeds that grew sparse and gray as if struggling for life in poisoned soil. No birdsong echoed here, no chirping insects filled the silence, not even the usual scuttling of city rats could be heard. The only sound was the wind. It sighed and moaned through the broken lattices and gaping holes in the aviary domes, a lonely, sibilant whisper that seemed to carry forgotten cries. It stirred the dust, fine, gray, and smelling faintly of old nests, decay, and something else, a faint, sharp tang like cold iron or ozone, but failed to disperse the heavy, stagnant feel of the air. Gerrod moved with heightened alertness, his hand resting near his bow, his senses straining against the unnatural stillness. The lack of wildlife, even vermin, prickled at his ranger instincts. This place felt wrong, dead, yet watchful. Ace shivered, pulling his cloak tighter, his gaze darting nervously between the looming shadowed structures. "Place gives me the creeps," he muttered, his voice barely disturbing the silence. "Told you, it was cursed." The air clung cold and heavy, thick with neglect and the chilling possibility that the ghosts haunting this district were far more tangible and dangerous than mere legend. The oppressive silence of the Aviary District pressed in on them as they moved deeper into the ruins. The wind whispered through broken aviary domes like exhaled breaths, stirring dust that seemed to carry the faint, metallic scent Gerrod had noticed earlier. He scanned the crumbling stonework, his eyes searching for anything beyond natural decay. A pattern, a deliberate mark. Ace stayed close, his hand never far from his axe, examining lower sections of walls and kicking cautiously at loose piles of rubble. Beneath the arch of a collapsed entryway leading into one of the larger skeletal domes, Gerrod paused. His fingers traced the edge of a heavy foundation stone, partially obscured by thorny weeds. Something felt different here, a subtle roughness against the smoother erosion of the surrounding stone. He pulled away the clinging vines, revealing faint etchings just above ground level, almost lost to time and neglect. Sharp, angular lines formed a familiar, chilling pattern, the stylized raven's wing overlapping the jagged shadow. It was faded, weathered, but unmistakable. "Ace," Gerrod called softly, pointing. Ace hurried over, kneeling to examine the faint carving. "By the forge," he breathed, tracing the lines with a grimy finger. "It's the same mark, older maybe, but definitely the same." He looked around, his gaze sweeping the desolate ruins with new intensity. He spotted another, even fainter etching on the underside of a fallen lintel nearby, visible only from a low angle. "They were here," Ace stated grimly, standing up. "This wasn't just legend. This was Ravenshadow territory." The confirmation settled heavily, transforming the unsettling quiet from mere desolation into the palpable presence of a hidden, dangerous power. They stood on the hunting ground of myths. The confirmation that the Ravenshadows had marked this desolate place sent a fresh wave of unease through them. The faint symbols acted as grim signposts, transforming the random decay into a deliberate landscape, a territory claimed by shadow and silence. Following the direction indicated by the orientation of the last symbol they found, they pressed deeper into the heart of the Aviary District. The ruins became a true maze. Collapsed walls blocked once clear pathways, forcing them to backtrack or scramble over treacherous piles of rubble. Domed aviaries opened into enclosed courtyards overgrown with skeletal gray weeds, leading only to further dead ends. The wind moaned through the broken lattices, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow that played tricks on the eyes, making every dark corner seem poised to reveal movement. Their progress was slow, methodical. They moved from shadow to shadow, scanning every potential surface. The underside of arches, loose paving stones, the base of tilting perches, searching for the next faint etching of the wing and shadow. The symbols were scarce, deliberately inconspicuous, forcing them to examine their surroundings with painstaking care. Sometimes a symbol pointed down a clear path. Other times, it was etched near a hole in a wall or a narrow gap between collapsed structures, guiding them through the ruins' hidden veins. With each symbol found, the sense of trespassing intensified. They were walking a path laid out long ago by ruthless killers, penetrating deeper into the heart of their forgotten domain. The silence felt heavier here, the air colder. Ace muttered darkly about traps, his hand constantly near his axe, while Gerrod felt the unnatural stillness prickle along his spine, a profound absence of life that felt like a warning. They weren't just exploring ruins. They were following a deliberate trail into the lair of legends. The trail of faint Ravenshadow symbols led them towards the center of the ruined district, where the skeletal remains of what might have been a grand central pavilion or bell tower clawed at the night sky. Unlike the domed aviaries, this structure was mostly collapsed inwards, a jagged heap of massive stone blocks, twisted metal supports, and shattered masonry. Weeds choked its base, and the wind howled mournfully through the remaining gaps high above. The last symbol they found was etched onto a loose paving stone near the tower's base, subtly angled downwards towards the chaotic pile of rubble. At first glance, the debris seemed impassable, a solid wall of collapsed stone sealing off any potential entrance into the tower's foundation. Ace kicked at a large block, grunting. Dead end again, or just buried? Gerrod knelt, examining the base of the rubble pile where it met the original foundation stones. His fingers traced the lines where massive blocks had fallen against each other. He noticed a narrow, shadowed gap between two particularly large pieces of masonry, partially concealed by thorny vines and loose scree. It looked too small, too accidental. But peering closer, he saw the faint, telltale scratches on the edges of the stones bordering the gap. Marks left by repeated passage, however careful. Here, Gerrod indicated the narrow opening. It looks collapsed, but the edges show wear. This might be it. Ace joined him, pulling aside the vines. He shone the oil lamp's beam into the narrow gap. It opened into a dark space beyond, revealing not solid earth, but the top steps of a stone staircase descending into blackness. The air that drifted out felt different, colder, drier, and carrying that faint, sharp metallic tang they'd noticed before, stronger now. Hidden beneath the chaotic collapse of the bell tower lay a concealed entrance, marked only by the faintest trail of symbols, leading down into the earth, into the heart of the Ravenshadows' potential lair. Ace peered down the narrow stone staircase, disappearing into the utter blackness beneath the bell tower. The air wafting up felt ancient, undisturbed, yet carried an undercurrent of warning. Symbols lead here, all right, he muttered, his voice tight. But nobody, especially not paranoid shadow killers like the Ravenshadows are rumored to be, leaves their front door wide open. He held the oil lamp closer to the top step, examining the surrounding stonework, the threshold, the ceiling just inside the opening. His experienced eyes immediately caught the subtle signs. A tiny, almost invisible tripwire stretched taut across the second step down, anchored to nearly imperceptible holes drilled in the side walls. Higher up, Nestled in the shadows where the ceiling met the wall, just inside the entrance, he spotted several small, precisely aimed nozzles, likely connected to a pressure plate further down or triggered by the wire, ready to spray poison gas or darts. And inlaid into the stone of the threshold itself was a complex pattern of interlocking metal plates, hinting at a sophisticated pressure-sensitive mechanism designed to trigger alarms or worse. "Well now, ain't this cozy?" Ace growled softly, pulling out his collection of fine wires, probes, and tension tools from hidden pouches. Old work, but good work. Complex. He knelt carefully on the top step, avoiding putting any weight on the threshold plate. With meticulous precision, honed over centuries, he began to work. He used a slender wire hook to gently lift the tripwire, tracing it back to its anchor points and carefully disengaging the tension mechanism without triggering it. Next, using a tiny mirror angled on a thin rod, he examined the nozzles above, identifying the faint lines of the tubes feeding them and carefully crimping them closed near the source with specialized pliers. Finally, addressing the pressure plate, he used fine probes to feel beneath the interlocking metal, identifying and carefully jamming the complex series of triggers and counterweights beneath. It was slow, painstaking work, performed in near silence, each subtle click or scrape amplified in the tense quiet. Gerrod stood guard behind him, bow ready, watching the darkness below and the ruins above, acutely aware that disarming the traps was only the first hurdle. With the last click of a jammed pressure plate mechanism, Ace wiped a bead of sweat from his brow, despite the chill air rising from the stairs. "Should be clear," he whispered, though his voice lacked absolute certainty. "Let's move slow." He took the first tentative step down, testing his weight carefully. The stone held. Gerrod followed, his senses stretched taut, peering into the oppressive darkness below. The stone stairs descended steeply into the earth, spiraling downwards. The air grew colder, drier, carrying the scent of old stone, dust, and that persistent faint tang of ozone or cold iron. After about 20 feet, the stairs opened into a surprisingly large circular chamber carved directly from the bedrock beneath the ruined tower. The lamplight revealed a space frozen in time, clearly long abandoned but remarkably preserved by the dry, still air. Unlike the Moonrat Guildhall's decay, this place felt intentionally sealed, mothballed. Racks along the curved walls held rows of dark, featureless cloaks, identical in cut, each bearing a small, embroidered Ravenshadow symbol, the wing and shadow, stitched discreetly onto the inner lining near the collar. Neatly arranged beneath them were caches of specialized tools. Grappling hooks with unnervingly sharp talons, coils of thin black rope, vials containing viscous liquids, and an array of sleek, black, non-reflective daggers and throwing stars. In the center of the chamber stood several wooden training dummies, scarred and battered. But the damage wasn't random hacking. It consisted of precise, deep cuts and punctures targeting vital points: throat, heart, temple, marked with chilling accuracy. The strikes were clean, economical, suggesting a fighting style focused on lethal efficiency and speed. This wasn't just a safe house. It was a meticulously organized base, a training ground where the deadly skills of the Ravenshadows were honed, abandoned abruptly but left almost perfectly intact, like a snapshot of their lethal existence. While Ace examined the racks of unsettlingly uniform cloaks and tools, Gerrod was drawn to a series of stone niches carved into the far wall of the circular chamber. Unlike the weapon racks, these held scrolls, not the thick ledgers of the scribe's hall, but slender rolls of dark, treated parchment, or possibly thin sheets of beaten metal, stacked neatly. Most were brittle with age, some crumbling at the edges, but many remained intact, protected by the dry, stable environment. He carefully lifted one, the material cool and slightly metallic to the touch, possibly thin, treated hide rather than parchment. Unrolling it cautiously, he found not records or names, but lines of tightly written script in an archaic, angular style. It wasn't a history or a ledger, but something else entirely. The shadow strikes unseen, unheard. Its greatest strength is the belief it does not exist. He picked up another fragment, this one on brittle parchment. Knowledge is the sharpest blade. Control the flow of secrets. Control the target. Misdirection is the shield. Silence the armor. Another scroll spoke of targets. Eliminate the source of instability. Prune the branches of chaos before they weaken the trunk. Sentiment is weakness. Only outcome matters. Act decisively, leave no trace. They found more fragments, piecing together a chilling philosophy. It spoke of ruthless pragmatism, absolute secrecy, and the strategic application of stealth and assassination, not for personal gain or territory, but for a perceived higher purpose, maintaining a hidden, brutal form of order by eliminating destabilizing elements. There was no mention of gods, kings, or guilds, only of the balance, the necessary cull, and the importance of operating entirely outside recognized power structures. The Ravenshadows weren't just assassins. They were surgical instruments of a harsh, hidden doctrine, believing their unseen manipulations were essential, their methods justified by the desired outcome. Hidden in the deepest shadows of one of the stone niches, tucked behind the scrolls detailing the Ravenshadows' chilling philosophy, sat something more mundane, yet potentially more revealing: a chest. It wasn't large, perhaps 3 feet long and 2 feet wide, but it was heavily constructed from dark, iron-bound wood, clearly built for security rather than aesthetics. Thick bands of black iron reinforced the corners and lid, studded with heavy rivets. There were no ornate carvings, only the impression of grim functionality. A single, complex lock mechanism dominated the front of the chest. It wasn't a simple keyhole. It featured multiple interlocking tumblers, possibly requiring several keys or a specific sequence to open, set within a heavy iron faceplate that looked resistant to brute force. There were no obvious guild markings or symbols on the chest itself, but its placement within this hidden Ravenshadow sanctuary suggested it held something of significance. Records, perhaps, or relics, or items deemed too valuable or dangerous to leave on the open racks. Ace ran his hand over the cold iron bands, his fingers probing the intricate lock mechanism. "Now this," he murmured, a flicker of professional interest cutting through his unease, "is serious work, not just keeping out casual thieves. This is meant to stop someone who knows locks." He tapped the heavy faceplate. "Reinforced, probably trapped too." Gerrod eyed the chest warily. Given the context, the Ravenshadows' ruthless pragmatism, their focus on secrets and control, whatever lay inside this heavily secured container was likely central to their operations or history. It felt like the heart of the sanctuary, protected by layers of secrecy and formidable security. Opening it would be risky, potentially triggering defenses they hadn't yet detected, but the lure of the secrets it might contain was undeniable. This chest felt like the final piece in this hidden lair. Ace knelt before the iron-bound chest, pulling out his finest set of lockpicks, slender, dark tools that gleamed faintly in the lamplight. He examined the complex lock mechanism closely, using a thin probe to gently explore the multiple keyholes and tumbler sets. His brow furrowed in concentration, the only sounds in the chamber the faint scrape of metal on metal and his own quiet breathing. "Humph," he grunted after a few minutes of probing. "This is no common guild lockbox. Feels like military grade, almost. Or maybe dwarven craftsmanship. Damn their intricate minds." He inserted a tension wrench into one keyhole, applying feather-light pressure, while simultaneously manipulating a complex pick in another. Multiple independent tumbler sets, hardened steel pins, probably got false gates and anti-picking wards built in. He worked with intense focus, his fingers moving with a dancer's precision despite their thickness. Beads of sweat dotted his forehead, gleaming in the lamp's glow. "Whoever made this knew their business," he muttered, concentrating on a particularly stubborn tumbler. "Quality is exceptional. Built to withstand tampering, brute force, probably even minor magical intrusion." Gerrod stood back, watching his friend work, keeping an eye on the shadowed corners of the chamber. He knew better than to interrupt Ace when he was deep in concentration, especially with a lock this complex. The sheer quality of the chest's security spoke volumes about the importance of its contents and the resources available to the Ravenshadows. They weren't just skilled assassins. They were well-funded, organized, and deeply concerned with protecting their secrets. Each soft click from the lock under Ace's ministrations seemed to echo the weight of the history hidden within. Minutes stretched into an eternity, marked only by the faint rhythmic clicking and scraping sounds from the lock mechanism under Ace's expert ministrations. Gerrod felt the tension coil tight in his own muscles, his gaze fixed on the iron-bound chest, anticipating. Gold? Weapons? Arcane artifacts? Finally, with a series of soft, satisfying clicks, the last tumbler fell into place. Ace carefully withdrew his tools, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. He let out a slow breath. "Got it," he announced quietly, relief mixing with anticipation in his voice. He grasped the heavy iron latch and lifted it. With a soft groan of old hinges, the heavy lid swung open. They both leaned forward, peering inside, the lamplight spilling into the chest's interior. There was no gleam of gold, no sinister glow of magic, no neatly stacked weapons. The chest was only about half full, and its contents seemed mundane, personal. Neatly folded at the bottom lay several sets of dark practical clothing. Tunics, breeches, gloves. Similar in style to the cloaks on the racks, but clearly worn, not just stored. Beside them was a small leather-bound journal, its cover blank and featureless. Resting on top of the clothes was a water skin, still supple, and a small pouch that likely contained dried rations or personal effects. Tucked into a corner was a whetstone, well used, and a coil of fine dark wire. But nestled amongst these practical items were things that spoke of an individual, not just an operative. A small, intricately carved wooden bird, perhaps a hawk or falcon, worn smooth from handling. Given the context, the Ravenshadows' ruthless pragmatism, their focus on secrets and control, whatever lay inside this heavily secured container was likely central to their operations or history. It felt like the heart of the sanctuary, protected by layers of secrecy and formidable security. Opening it would be risky, potentially triggering defenses they hadn't yet detected, but the lure of the secrets it might contain was undeniable. This chest felt like the final piece in this hidden lair. Ace knelt before the iron-bound chest, pulling out his finest set of lockpicks, slender, dark tools that gleamed faintly in the lamplight. He examined the complex lock mechanism closely, using a thin probe to gently explore the multiple keyholes and tumbler sets. His brow furrowed in concentration, the only sounds in the chamber the faint scrape of metal on metal and his own quiet breathing. "Humph," he grunted after a few minutes of probing. "This is no common guild lockbox. Feels like military grade almost. Or maybe dwarven craftsmanship. Damn their intricate minds." He inserted a tension wrench into one keyhole, applying feather-light pressure, while simultaneously manipulating a complex pick in another. Multiple independent tumbler sets, hardened steel pins, probably got false gates and anti-picking wards built in. He worked with intense focus, his fingers moving with a dancer's precision despite their thickness. Beads of sweat dotted his forehead, gleaming in the lamp's glow. "Whoever made this knew their business," he muttered, concentrating on a particularly stubborn tumbler. "Quality is exceptional, built to withstand tampering, brute force, probably even minor magical intrusion." Gerrod stood back, watching his friend work, keeping an eye on the shadowed corners of the chamber. He knew better than to interrupt Ace when he was deep in concentration, especially with a lock this complex. The sheer quality of the chest's security spoke volumes about the importance of its contents and the resources available to the Ravenshadows. They weren't just skilled assassins, they were well-funded, organized, and deeply concerned with protecting their secrets. Each soft click from the lock under Ace's ministrations seemed to echo the weight of the history hidden within. Minutes stretched into an eternity, marked only by the faint rhythmic clicking and scraping sounds from the lock mechanism under Ace's expert ministrations. Gerrod felt the tension coil tight in his own muscles, his gaze fixed on the iron-bound chest, anticipating, what? Gold? Weapons? Arcane artifacts? Finally, with a series of soft, satisfying clicks, the last tumbler fell into place. Ace carefully withdrew his tools, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. He let out a slow breath. "Got it," he announced quietly, relief mixing with anticipation in his voice. He grasped the heavy iron latch and lifted it. With a soft groan of old hinges, the heavy lid swung open. They both leaned forward, peering inside, the lamplight spilling into the chest's interior. There was no gleam of gold, no sinister glow of magic, no neatly stacked weapons. The chest was only about half full, and its contents seemed mundane, personal. Neatly folded at the bottom lay several sets of dark, practical clothing. Tunics, breeches, gloves, similar in style to the cloaks on the racks, but clearly worn, not just stored. Beside them was a small, leather-bound journal, its cover blank and featureless. Resting on top of the clothes was a water skin, still supple, and a small pouch that likely contained dried rations or personal effects. Tucked into a corner was a whetstone, well used, and a coil of fine dark wire. But nestled amongst these practical items were things that spoke of an individual, not just an operative. A small, intricately carved wooden bird, perhaps a hawk or falcon, worn smooth from handling. A single pressed wildflower, a mountain bloom. Gerrod recognized from the peaks near Verdant Haven, preserved between sheets of waxed paper. Ace, meanwhile, was carefully lifting the small collection of personal items from the chest. He picked up the carved wooden bird, turning it over, then the pressed flower, his expression puzzled by the lack of obvious valuables or incriminating documents. Then, his fingers closed around something small and metallic, nestled beneath a fold in one of the dark tunics. He lifted it into the lamplight. It wasn't another pendant. This was a locket, fashioned from tarnished silver, oval-shaped and relatively plain, attached to a delicate silver chain. Unlike the smooth, natural shape of the green stone pendants, this was clearly crafted, bearing faint floral engravings around its edge, almost obscured by time and lack of polish. It felt different, more traditionally feminine, perhaps, than the other starkly practical items in the chest. "Well now," Ace murmured, holding the locket up. "This doesn't seem to fit the rest of the gear." He turned it over. The back was smooth, undecorated. He found the tiny catch along the side, his thumbnail clicking it open. The locket sprang open, revealing 2 miniature portraits within, painted with exquisite detail despite their tiny size. On one side, a young woman with dark, intelligent eyes and flowing brown hair smiled softly. A face Gerrod had seen only in fleeting memories, and Ace perhaps not at all. On the other side, nestled close beside her, was the unmistakable image of a much younger elven man with familiar green eyes and dirty blonde hair, his expression serious yet gentle. It was Elysia. And beside her, impossibly, undeniably, was her husband, Gerrod's father, Galadrim. Ace held the tarnished silver locket out towards Gerrod, his expression a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. "Found this tucked under the clothes," he said quietly. Gerrod reached for it, his fingers trembling slightly as they closed around the cool metal. It felt foreign compared to the familiar weight of the green stone pendant still resting against his chest. He turned the locket over in his palm, studying the faint floral engravings, so different from the stark practicality of everything else associated with the Ravenshadows. His heart hammered against his ribs. This felt deeply personal, intrinsically linked to the woman whose presence seemed to haunt these ruins. With fumbling fingers, he found the small catch Ace had indicated and pressed it gently. The locket clicked open. He stared down at the 2 miniature images nestled within the tarnished silver frames, his breath catching in his throat. They weren't paintings, but incredibly fine sketches, rendered in charcoal or graphite with astonishing detail and sensitivity, capturing not just likeness but personality. On the left, a woman looked out, her depicted age perhaps early 20s. Dark, intelligent eyes held a hint of mischievousness beneath gently arching brows. Her dark hair flowed loosely around her shoulders. Even in the tiny monochrome sketch, Gerrod recognized the set of her jaw, the curve of her lips. It was undeniably Elysia, younger than his clearest memories, vibrant and alive. On her right, sketched with equal skill, was an elf. His features were fine, classically elven, with pointed elven ears just visible beneath waves of golden hair, Gerrod knew instinctively. His expression was serious, thoughtful, yet his green eyes, so startlingly familiar, held a deep gentleness as they gazed towards the woman beside him. Gerrod knew that face. He had seen it in rare, treasured moments when his mother spoke of his father, her voice softening with love and loss. Galadrim. Here, preserved in this hidden locket, was a stolen moment of peace, of love, captured decades ago. His parents together, sketched with intimate tenderness. Finding this fragile image of love and connection hidden amongst the grim relics of the Ravenshadows felt profoundly incongruous. A heartbreaking contradiction that only deepened the mystery surrounding his mother's true identity and fate. Gerrod's gaze fixed on the left side of the open locket, his breath catching in his throat. Her dark eyes, rendered with just a few masterful strokes of charcoal, sparkled with an intensity he vaguely recalled. A fierce intelligence mixed with a hint of restless energy, a spark that hadn't yet been banked by sorrow or secrecy. Her dark hair wasn't severely pulled back, as he sometimes remembered it, but flowed more freely around her face, framing high cheekbones and a determined chin. There was a softness around her mouth, a hint of a smile perhaps, suggesting a warmth and vibrancy that time and hardship might have later eroded. This was closer to the mother, who had taught him the names of flowers in Verdant Haven, whose laughter sometimes echoed through the forest clearings, who had shared stories of the stars before her gaze turned inwards, burdened by secrets. It was the image of the woman his father must have loved, full of life and passion. Seeing her captured like this, so young and vital, hidden away in this cold, dark sanctuary of assassins, felt like finding a single, perfect wildflower blooming impossibly in a field of ashes. It was a heartbreaking glimpse of the person she might have been, before shadows, Moonrat, Meister, or Ravenshadow, claimed her. With trembling fingers, Gerrod shifted his focus to the right side of the locket. His breath hitched again, this time not in recognition, but in shock. It was the same woman, unmistakably Elysia, yet profoundly changed. The sketch depicted her years later, perhaps decades. The youthful vibrancy was gone, replaced by a stark, almost severe maturity. Her face was thinner, the high cheekbones more pronounced, casting sharp shadows. Lines, fine but distinct, bracketed her mouth and fanned from the corners of her eyes, lines etched not just by time, but by hardship, discipline, or perhaps profound loss. The softness around her lips had hardened into a firm, unyielding line. But the most chilling change was in her eyes. The intelligent spark remained, but the warmth, the hint of mischief, had been extinguished, replaced by an unnerving coldness, a piercing, assessing gaze that seemed to look out from the sketch with detached, almost ruthless clarity. This was not the mother he remembered, nor the vibrant young woman in the other portrait. This was someone else, someone formidable, hardened, perhaps dangerous. As his eyes adjusted to the tiny details, he noticed something else, almost invisible beneath the sketch, etched faintly into the silver itself, as if added later with a fine, sharp point. It was the jagged, angular symbol of the raven's wing overlapping the shadow. And beneath the symbol, in tiny, precise lettering, was a title, Mistress Ravenshadow. The locket felt suddenly ice-cold in his hand. The two portraits stared back at him, Elysia, the beloved mother, and Elysia, the Mistress Ravenshadow. The horrifying theory voiced in the scribe's hall wasn't madness. It was truth. His mother hadn't just been connected to the Ravenshadows. She had led them. The world dissolved into a roaring sound in Gerrod's ears. The tarnished silver locket felt simultaneously weightless and impossibly heavy in his trembling hand. Mistress Ravenshadow. The title, etched beneath the chillingly familiar, hardened face of his mother, resonated like a death knell through the dusty silence of the chamber. It wasn't a possibility anymore. It wasn't a horrifying theory born of fragmented clues and desperate speculation. It was confirmation, cold, hard, and etched in silver. His mother, Elysia, the woman who taught him reverence for life, who sang elven lullabies, whose gentle touch he still vaguely remembered, had also been the leader of a near-mythical order of ruthless assassins. The dichotomy was shattering, incomprehensible. The vibrant young woman in one portrait, full of love and life, gazing at his father. And beside her, the same woman, transformed by time and shadow into the cold-eyed mistress of a faction known for brutal efficiency and absolute secrecy. He felt Ace's hand steady him as his knees threatened to buckle. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the locket, from the two faces that represented the irreconcilable halves of his mother's hidden life. The Ravenshadows destroying the Moonrats wasn't a separate event. It was likely her command. The palace blueprints weren't just her contribution. They were her plan, conceived perhaps for reasons utterly divorced from the Shadowmeister's ambitions. Everything shifted. The Shadowmeister, the Temptress, who might still be connected, perhaps a successor or protege, they were all ripples spreading outwards from this central, devastating truth. His mother hadn't been a victim caught between forces. She was the force, Mistress Ravenshadow. The confirmation hit him like a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs, leaving him reeling in the cold, dark heart of her hidden sanctuary, the ruins of his past collapsing around him. Ace laid notes detailing espionage and manipulation tactics beside the spot where the locket had rested. He looked from the chillingly practical instructions back to Gerrod, whose eyes were slowly regaining focus, though filled with a profound, weary sadness. "Gerrod," Ace stated, his voice low but emphatic, the pieces clicking together with brutal logic. Think about it. He tapped the notes. These methods, infiltration, disguise, psychological games, manipulating magic and shadows, they're a perfect match for everything we've heard about the Temptress. The fear she inspires, the way she operates, the unnatural talents the Meister's thugs whispered about. He then gestured towards the memory of the locket, towards the hardened face etched beneath the Ravenshadow symbol. And these are clearly written in your mother's hand, Elysia, the same woman the locket names Mistress Ravenshadow. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. It's not 3 different mysteries, Elf. It's one woman wearing 3 different masks. He ticked them off on his fingers. Elysia, the exiled mother, the arcane scholar, possibly linked to the Moonrats in her youth. Mistress Ravenshadow, the cold, ruthless leader of a mythical assassin cult, architect of the palace heist plans, author of these manipulation manuals. And the Temptress, the currently active operative, feared specialist for the Shadow Meister, using Ravenshadow methods and maybe even bearing their mark. He looked at Gerrod squarely. They're all the same person, aren't they? Your mother didn't just lead the Ravenshadows. She is the Temptress. She faked her disappearance, or her death, or whatever happened after the Moonrat massacre and reinvented herself. She's been playing this long game for years. The theory, horrifying as it was, fit every piece of evidence they had uncovered. The signature, the locket, the Moonrat connections, the Ravenshadow lore, the Temptress's methods, the palace plans. Elysia hadn't vanished. She had transformed, becoming the very shadow that now threatened the kingdom, her motives still terrifyingly unclear. The chilling synthesis, Mistress Ravenshadow, the Temptress, all one entity, landed like a physical blow. If true, if his mother had donned these successive masks, operating in the shadows for decades, then the brutal efficiency of the Moonrat massacre took on an even more horrifying dimension. Then, the Moonrats. Gerrod whispered, the words catching in his throat. If she was Mistress Ravenshadow, she wouldn't have been their victim. She wouldn't have been caught in the crossfire. He looked at Ace, the terrible logic compelling him forward. She would have ordered it. She would have led the attack. Ace nodded slowly, his expression grim. Fits, don't it? The ruthless pragmatism described in those scrolls. Eliminate the source of instability. Leave no trace. She reconnects with them, maybe learns something, maybe decides they're a liability to her larger plans. And then erases them, uses her own Ravenshadows to wipe out her former associates. The image was monstrous. Elysia, turning on the very people she sought out upon returning to Oswegonia, unleashing her hidden faction upon them with devastating precision. But why? Why orchestrate such a brutal purge? Did they betray her? Gerrod wondered aloud, searching for any reason, any justification, however twisted. Did they refuse to follow her new path? Or? A colder thought surfaced. Was it simply tidying up? Removing witnesses to her past, erasing the traces of Elysia so Mistress Ravenshadow could operate without ties? Maybe the Moonrats served a temporary purpose, a way back into the city's underbelly, a source of information, and were then discarded ruthlessly once that purpose was fulfilled. Or perhaps their destruction served an even darker goal, related to the Shadow Meister's simultaneous rise. Did eliminating the Moonrats somehow pave the way for him, clearing competition, creating the chaos from which he could build his empire? Was their massacre a calculated move in a long, intricate game orchestrated by his mother, with goals far exceeding simple underworld control or even the theft of the crown? The why behind the Moonrats' destruction became intrinsically linked to Elysia's ultimate, terrifyingly obscure grand design. Amidst the chillingly practical notes on manipulation and infiltration, Gerrod's fingers brushed against a single sheet of parchment that felt different, thinner, stiffer, and covered not in Elysia's meticulous script, but in rows of complex symbols and geometric shapes, interspersed with seemingly random number sequences. It was clearly a coded message, but the system was entirely unfamiliar, bearing no resemblance to the Moonrat cipher wheel's structure. Ace, Gerrod murmured, holding the sheet out. Look at this. It was tucked within the other notes, but it looks like it's new. It's not her usual handwriting. It's code. Ace took the parchment, his eyes narrowing as he studied the intricate symbols. Definitely not Moonrat, he confirmed after a moment. This is different. Looks like a positional grid cipher, maybe, combined with symbol substitution? Complex. Need time, maybe reference keys we don't have. He scanned the dense block of symbols, searching for any recognizable patterns or repetitions. His gaze snagged on a short sequence near the bottom, which seemed slightly less complex, perhaps a header or identifying tag. He focused on it, mentally testing different decryption methods based on similar systems he'd encountered long ago. After several minutes of intense concentration, muttering calculations under his breath, a few words emerged, fragmented but potentially crucial. Procure, volatile reagent, delivery, Terrell's workshop, schedule imminent. He looked up at Gerrod, his expression grim. Can't crack the main message yet, but this bit, it talks about getting a volatile reagent. Delivery scheduled soon at alchemist Terrell's workshop. He frowned. Terrell rings a bell, runs a shop over in the Artisans' Quarter, known for dealing in rare, often dangerous alchemical supplies. The discovery added another layer of urgency and confusion. While they were grappling with the revelations of the past, Elysia, as the Temptress, was clearly active now. What volatile reagent did she need? And for what purpose? Could it be connected to the palace heist? Perhaps something to bypass magical wards or create a diversion? Or was it for something else entirely? Another facet of her decades-long plan? The coded message, though only partially deciphered, provided a concrete, present-day lead, pulling them abruptly back from the ghosts of the past towards the immediate threat posed by Mistress Ravenshadow's ongoing operations. The cold reality settled over them in the abandoned Ravenshadow safehouse, thick and suffocating as the dust of ages. Gerrod's mother, Elysia, Mistress Ravenshadow, the cold-eyed leader who orchestrated the brutal annihilation of the Moonrats, and the Temptress, the shadowy operative currently manipulating events, perhaps usurping the Shadow Meister while using methods penned by her own hand decades ago. One woman, 3 terrifying masks, her path paved with secrets, betrayal, and bloodshed. And she was active now. The partially deciphered coded message, tucked within her notes on manipulation, spoke not of past atrocities, but of present-day logistics. Procuring a volatile reagent from alchemist Terrell, delivery imminent. The palace heist plans, intricate and audacious, might be her endgame, or merely one facet of a larger, incomprehensible design. Was this dangerous alchemical substance needed for that heist? Perhaps to breach the vault's formidable magical defenses? Or was it destined for another purpose entirely, another move in the long, complex game she had been playing for decades? Her relationship with the Shadow Meister became utterly opaque. Was the Temptress persona genuine servitude, a mask worn to manipulate him, using his resources while pursuing her own Ravenshadow agenda? Was he unwittingly using her old plans, unaware of the true identity of his powerful agent? Or were they locked in a complex dance of opposition, their goals only superficially aligned? The musty air of the safehouse offered no answers, only the chilling presence of Elysia's multifaceted, ruthless legacy. The immediate threat wasn't just the potential theft of the crown, but the actions of Mistress Ravenshadow herself, operating now under the guise of the Temptress. Understanding what volatile reagent she sought and why felt critical. Intercepting this delivery at alchemist Terrell's workshop might be their only chance to glimpse her current intentions, to understand the true shape of the storm she was poised to unleash upon Oswegonia, and perhaps, finally, to comprehend the terrifying endgame of the woman Gerrod once called Mother.
The truth is revealed. Elysia, the loving mother. Mistress Ravenshadow, the ruthless assassin. They are one and the same. Gerrod's quest for his past has ended in the most devastating way imaginable, uncovering a legacy of darkness that redefines everything he thought he knew. But the coded messages found in her lair speak of current events, of dangerous alchemical reagents, and a plan still in motion. What is the true purpose of the umbral catalyst? And what is Elysia's next move in her decades-long game? Find out in Chapter 12, The Stain of Dark Magic. The face behind the mask has been revealed. Subscribe and witness the fallout.